Well, hello there. We're back, as they say. Um, we're going to be talking about a time on Earth story about Jesus. May not contain said person, but it happened during that time. So, what are we going to talk about before that? We have to have that little spurt of wisdom. Oh, let me give you something I probably have talked about a couple of times before, but I may not have. So, it's always good to review anyway. One of those things is if you don't own something, you can't change it. So if you're saying, this person over here caused that damage, well, they may have. They may have walked over and slugged you, knocked you on the ground. Okay, now you have a sore jaw, and it's their fault. But as long as it's their fault, you can't do anything about it. You can't heal. Well, your body will heal, but the trauma you just went through, no, not going anywhere. And you may say, well, I didn't do anything wrong. Probably didn't. Who knows? But if you don't own it, you can't change it. So you have to own whatever part of it is yours. Well, maybe I didn't hear God and I went into the wrong space and, you know, um, well, there's the start. Maybe I didn't hear God. I did something that was incorrect. Maybe I did, stare at his girlfriend or whatever. And he thought I was being rude. And his way of dealing with rudeness was slanking me onto the ground. Yes, that was wonderful. But what am I owning? Well, I'm owning that I'm in the place. That's where I was. May not have listened to God. Got that. What's next? Well, how about your response? You know, well, yeah. Well, there was that. I got up and wanted to slug him back. Okay. So now you're owning things, right? Now you can change those things. One, we can start with forgiveness, right? We forgive. Yes, I know. I've gone over that process so many times. But it's a beautiful process. We forgive, we forgive, we forgive. We don't know what all's going on there. It's just an example. But we do know that something happened and that we have to deal with it. And so that's how we get to that place. We own everything we need to own. Then we can change everything we need to change, usually starting with forgiveness and then working through, better ability to hear God, not walking into the place where you get slugged. Maybe checking over your few minutes beforehand, maybe you were looking at his girlfriend in a way that was unbecoming. And he had a right to hit you in a way, but he didn't in the same way. See, it's convoluted here. But if you own all of that, you go, okay, I don't know what happened. I don't know why you got angry. I don't know. All of that. Just own it. Okay, that's where I am. Then guess what? You can go before God and go, well, forgive me for whatever I did. I don't know what it was. And I forgive him for whatever this is. And, I've left the situation, get called a coward, whatever. I'm done. You know, but now you can process that completely. I know, a little jumbled, but I think you might have got a point or two. Let's move on. So if you wish to get a hold of me, it's eric@starthealing.me, and you send me an email and you say you wish a visit with me, talk, and I'll send you a link. You book an appointment. We'll talk. We'll see if we are part of your healing puzzle. If we click together, and we'll work together. We'll talk about the rest when we get there. That part is without charge. It's just a meeting of people to find out if we have something for you. That's it. Please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff is always helpful. And it does help me understand that I'm doing something that people are enjoying. So let's get on to that story, the wonderful story that, time on Earth story about that time when Christ was on the earth. You know, when people say, well, these stories are around, I say, oh yeah, they're written on scrolls and things, and they weren't canon. They weren't like things that belonging in the Bible, but they do give you more insight on that time and place and more of the compassion, care, and concern of God, of course. That's the type of stories we tell. But, they don't always have happy endings, but some do. This one, well, it's an interesting one because it kind of denotes the time period. We got to understand it was a pretty rough space back then. Things were happening that wouldn't have been happening now. We're slightly more civilized in some ways, others maybe not. But let's talk about it. Her name doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You can call her whatever you like. She was just a person that was following, watching everything that Jesus did. She was there in the Sermon on the Mount. That was just happenstance, but after that, man, she was following. She wouldn't approach. She was unclean according to the, the religion of the time, but she listened and she followed and she did what she could to help. Uh, she became one of those in the audience, one of those in the crowd, one of those people that followed him around. But she never talked to him, not once. That would be bad. She was unclean. She hadn't done anything terrible, but she was unclean, and she knew that according to, the scribes, the Pharisees, all of those people. So she was unclean. She couldn't go before God. It was a cleansing thing she didn't have the money for, of course, and maybe that could work, but she was unclean. And she followed Jesus the entire time, right up to the cross. She stood there expecting the Roman to run her through because she was nothing. She didn't have worth or value. She was flotsam. She had been something once, but nothing now. Somehow it didn't happen. And she wasn't like right up on the mound. That would be again too close to something that holy, that beautiful. No, that's not where she was, but she was watching. She was also watching when he was put in the tomb, and she didn't stop watching. She was away, but she could see the tomb. She wasn't close, just close enough that she could see the tomb. She had a feeling, an inkling, something from all that he had said that something great was going to happen, but he had to wait. So she did. Of course, at the moment that the stone rolled away, she was napping in her tree that she was perched in. She hadn't eaten for 3 days. She hadn't drank barely the water from her goat skin. She didn't care. She was like waiting, waiting for this to happen, waiting for this to occur. And finally, something did. There was the stone rolled away. She was napping, a little upset at herself about that. But there was a conversation, and apparently the Messiah had risen. No, she never saw him rise, never saw him go anywhere. Nah, none of that. But she did find him later. But again, she didn't approach. She was unclean. But she watched him. She watched him talk with people, and then she watched him rise. She was in the 500, yeah, way back uh, over there. Had to wear one of those signs, unclean, please don't come near, type of thing. Well, what was her uncleanness? Well, she had some issues with. the way that the synagogue had told her who she had to marry when, and the man was a brutal, and probably would lead to her death. So she ran, and because of that, she was not following regs. And eventually they well made up something that she had a disease, and then they hung a sign on her, and she had to yell, "I'm unclean, I'm unclean." It's a terrible time. At least nobody else was going to kill her or throw her in the bushes and do something else to her. So when Jesus went up to heaven, she went, "Well, that was fun. What does that mean?" But then she noticed that his disciples were getting together in a space, so she stayed close by. She wasn't there, She was just trying to figure this out, the whole thing out. What he had said made her heart burn. It made her feel like she could get connected with God again, that she could get straightened out, that she could get figured out, whatever that was. But she didn't know what it would be. She was just on the outskirts. Then there was commotion in the room where the disciples were. Fire fell, not consuming form. She could see it, which was odd. Many couldn't, but they came out, they spoke, and talked about anyone that wanted to could accept this man that had walked the earth, that had died for them, and that rose again. She was in. She didn't know what she could do. She had this big sign. And it wasn't Peter or one of the majors that prayed for her. It was one of the other disciples. She never knew his name. He just walked over and said, "Do you wish to join the way? Do you wish to accept this Messiah as your savior?" And she goes, "Yeah, let's do that." When he prayed for her, he put his hand on her. That was big time. And he lifted that sign off of her and he said, "There's no use for that anymore. You're clean." And she immediately laid hands on whatever she could. She cooked, she cleaned, she did everything. She felt this joy in her heart that she had never felt ever. And she told everyone that would listen that, "I've accepted the Messiah, and the Messiah now lives, and his Holy Spirit lives in me." And she was telling everybody. And all of a sudden, the outcast, "Gonna get you. That's me," became and got called into the center of community. Pretty good at sewer. Apparently, she sewed some clothes. Pretty good with kids. She's kind of an all-rounder. Cooked, cleaned. Would eventually find her real one that God had for her. And he would do a kingsman redeemer and redeem her. And they would walk forward and be part of the community and eventually end up in Ephesus. Oh, yeah, it's New Ephesians. That's the name of the book. That's the name of the writing. In Ephesus, and eventually, farther than that, all just being helpers. I mean, he was good with his hands and fixing things, so that's what they did. But they always told everyone about this man that she had followed, so she knew all of his stuff. And then one day, she met Paul. a few weeks after his conversion, actually. They were kind of scared of that man, but God said he was in, so he was in. And he listened to her talk about Christ, and he wrote some of those things down. And it's the only account of her life that we have. Now, I haven't filled in all the dots, and that would be a while. Well, it's like, you know, the life of Christ, the ministry, the crucifixion, all of that, and years beyond that. But here's what I wish you to take away from this is that in the fullness of time, and that's what it always happens as, she was removed from the space of being an outcast and unclean to community, to being a helper, to having a wonderful life. Now, there were hardships because when you walked in the way, there were hardships. They happened. But now she had a community to support her. She was no longer alone. So, you know, um, let's leave it there. And, if you ever want one of these stories more filled in, a little bit of more information, let me know in the comments. I'll watch for them. I don't always catch things, but sometimes I will. And maybe we can go a little deeper with this story of just a woman that was unclean, that stayed at the edge, but followed the entire ministry of Jesus on earth, and then went beyond that into the ministry of being a helper for Paul. Kind of amazing story going from unclean to community. Got me again. Anyway, emotions are great. Tears are intercession for us who are still working it out down here. The blessing will be a simple one, just joy and peace. I always wish those two for everyone. Abundance is always an amazing thing. And then very simply, insight and answers. Whatever that brush wishes to be painting, it's in God's hand right now. So according to Father's will, according to your will, it can be. Let's have a prayer. We come before you, Father, Spirit, Son, and we lift these amazing stories that you keep giving us. And you've given me the privilege of seeing these scrolls and seeing these things and having them translated before me. And all I had to do was move very big stones. That time has passed, but yet the stories remain and you use them. My library is fully open to you. It's their first time, then bring them to that space of knowing that Christ loves them, died for them. They can accept that gift and they can accept that they can't fix this on their own. So they need to ask God to forgive them for the way they have lived and ask God to help them live better. And they will. And then confess it to someone. Go give it to somebody else. Talk about it. Don't worry, you'll be so excited you will. Honest. If it's the 100th time, then let them go deeper, Lord. Much deeper. As you push back this darkness so that they can hear you, take them into a realm of understanding that they have not had before. And I just thank you for all of this. I thank you that you're inspiring this simple story and you're going to open that to who it is meant for. And I thank you for that. And I ask for grace and mercy and courage and strength as I go. And I say thankful, grateful, gratitude, thankful, grateful, gratitude, thankful, grateful, gratitude. Standing in awe, honor, respect, allowing all glory to flow to Father, Spirit, Son. This is, and so this is. So you'll be blessed.